Je déclare.
I call to order the wrap-up session and ministerial high-level meeting entitled Delivering on Peace, Consolidating Outcomes and Charting the Path Forward of the High-Level International Conference for the Peaceful Settlement of the Question of Palestine and the Implementation of the Two-State Solution.
Silence, s'il vous plaît.
Silence, please.
Okay. Mesdames et messieurs les chefs d'État,
Distinguished heads of state and government, distinguished ministers, Your Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellency Philemon Yang, President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity to cordially welcome all of you. I am honored to serve as your co-chair together with His Highness Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Saudi Arabia. Joining us this morning on the podium are His Excellency the Secretary General of the United Nations and His Excellency the President of the General Assembly. We thank you for joining us. This meeting brings together the outcomes of the thematic roundtables and working groups convened under the auspices of the high-level conference. It is aimed at consolidating key insights, highlighting consensus across political, legal, economic, and humanitarian tracks, and focusing on concrete next steps. I now give the floor to my fellow co-chair, His Highness Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Saudi Arabia, for his opening remarks.
In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, ladies and gentlemen, I express my sincere gratitude to His Excellency, the Foreign Minister of France, and the chairpersons of the working groups and roundtables for the efforts that they have made over the past months in preparing for this important conference, which is a pivotal station towards the two-state solution and ending the occupation for a just and lasting peace in the Middle East. And here we welcome the announcement by His Excellency the President of France, Macron, and of his country's intention to recognize the state of Palestine. This is a historic stage that reflects growing international consensus on the right of the Palestinian people to establish their independent state, and this aims to settle the international atmosphere towards the two-state solution. Kingdom of Saudi Arabia believes that achieving peace and prosperity for all peoples in the region starts by upholding justice for the Palestinian people and allowing them to exercise their legitimate rights, at the forefront of which is establishing their independent state on the 4 June 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. This is not simply a political position. Rather, this is a deeply entrenched belief that an independent Palestinian state is the true key to peace in the region. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, since the beginning of the catastrophic humanitarian crisis in Gaza and the dangerous escalation in the West Bank, we have given immediate and continuous support, either through humanitarian and relief aid or through supporting the all international organizations working, especially UNRWA and the World Food Programme and the Palestinian Authority. We stress that this humanitarian catastrophe that is a result of Israeli war and grave humanitarian violations must stop immediately so that we could end the suffering of the Palestinian people and hold accountable those who are responsible for it and put an end to a policy of impunity in a manner that's in line with the principles of international humanitarian law. Ladies and gentlemen, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia affirms the need to combine international efforts through this conference and through the words of the International Alliance to implement the two-state solution, to uphold the rights of the Palestinian people and support them in building their capacities and their state institutions, and within our commitment towards supporting the peaceful settlement. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia supports what the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said in conducting institutional reform so that the Palestinian Authority would be able to meet the aspirations of the Palestinian people. And we welcome the measures taken by the Palestinian government here, Prime Minister, and we welcome the participation of the Palestinian Prime Minister here. We support the efforts in development, youth empowerment, and supporting the Palestinian economy. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, in cooperation with the Republic of France, has guaranteed has helped in the World Bank transferring a sum of money to the Palestinian efforts, and we're working on signing a memorandum of understanding with the Palestinian Authority on technological transformation and human resources improvement, as well as supporting the Palestinian business sector. Here we give due importance to digital transformation and improving education in Palestine through technology transfer and improving the capacities of government employees, allowing data and technology to Palestinian youth to learn this technology is a step towards the future. And the Arab Peace Initiative, ladies and gentlemen, that was adopted in Beirut is the basis for any just and comprehensive peace. And here we confirm the need to support the international alliance for the two-state solution, to follow up on the outcomes of this conference, and to consolidate international efforts to implement clear steps that are chronologically clear to put an end to the occupation and embody the Palestinian state in a manner that would achieve stability and security to all the region and enhance cooperation between the different countries in a manner that would bolster international peace and security. In closing, I call on all states attending here to join the outcome document, which is a joint road plan towards the implementation of the two-state solution, and to combat any means to undermine it and to enhance peace possibilities that still exist if the will is there for them. Thank you.
Je remercie mon homologue de ses...
I thank my fellow co-chair for these remarks, and before we proceed, I would like to make some opening remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, alongside my Saudi colleague, I am pleased to open the work of this international high-level conference on the peaceful settlement of the Palestinian question and the implementation of the two-state solution, with the holding of this first wrap-up session on the thematic working groups. 80 years after the creation of the United Nations, we cannot accept civilians, women, and children being targeted when they go to food distribution places. That is unacceptable. Your presence in large numbers here today demonstrates the consensus and the mobilization of the international community around the appeal for the end of the war in Gaza. The New York conference, and this will be my second point, must be a turning point and a transformational juncture for the implementation of the two-state solution. We must work on the ways and means to go from the end of the war in Gaza to the end of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict at a time when this war is jeopardizing the stability and security of the entire region. To achieve this, only a political two-state solution will help respond to the legitimate aspirations of Israelis and Palestinians to live in peace and security. There is no alternative. Faced with the growing number of fait accompli on the ground and the unprecedented acceleration of the Israeli settlement building policy in the West Bank, the prospect for a viable Palestinian state must be preserved through the implementation of concrete measures. That is the meaning of the work of the 8 working groups constituted in the framework of this conference. Those groups are the driving force of our diplomatic initiative. Their work, which will be covered over the course of this morning, aims to identify concrete contributions that can be made to make the two-state solution a reality in all of the political, security, economic, and humanitarian dimensions of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The 17 co-chairs of the working groups have carried out in-depth work, the result of a lengthy consultation process consulting UN member states. They have mobilized, together with international organizations, NGOs, civil society, and thank you all. My third and final message is that through this New York process, we have begun an unprecedented and unstoppable momentum for a political solution in the Middle East, which is already beginning to bear fruit. In the context of this conference, we have managed to relaunch a collective momentum moving towards a political solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which responds to the legitimate security considerations of Israel and which ultimately ensures the contiguity and viability of the Palestinian state. We have returned to the center of diplomatic efforts the recognition of Palestine, the normalization and regional integration of Israel, the reform of Palestinian governance, and the disarmament of Hamas. It is in the context of this process that Mahmoud Abbas, in a letter last month, passed on to the President of the French Republic and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, took historic commitments, clearly condemning the terrorist attacks of the 7th of October, announcing the holding of elections in a year's time, committing to reforms to lead to the de-radicalization of Palestinian society, and affirming that this state of Palestine would be demilitarized. Another step forward in this New York process is that France, on the 13th of June in Paris, hosted an unprecedented meeting of Palestinian civil society and Israeli civil society. They held a dialogue on how to emerge from this permanent state of war through a political, just, and lasting solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Faced with the continuation of the war and the humanitarian tragedy in Gaza, through this conference we launch a collective appeal to action. This war has lasted for too long and it must end. The guns must be silenced and give way to an immediate and lasting ceasefire. All of the hostages captured following the barbaric attacks of the 7th of October 2023 carried out by Hamas and other terrorist groups must be released immediately, unconditionally, and in dignity. The calvary of the civilian population in Gaza in the midst of this humanitarian catastrophe must end. Ladies and gentlemen, the co-chairs of the working groups, the work that you are going to present to us today will serve as a compass for the entire international community to pave an irreversible political path towards the implementation of the two-state solution. Thank you.
J'invite à présent son Excellence.
I now invite His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, to make a statement.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I thank the government of France and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for organizing this international conference on the implementation of the two-state solution. We are here today with our eyes wide open, fully aware of the challenges before us. We know that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has endured for generations, defying hopes, defying diplomacy, defying countless resolutions, and defying international law. We know that the conflict continues to take lives, destroy futures, and destabilize the region and our world. But we also know its persistence is not inevitable. It can be resolved. That demands political will and courageous leadership, and it demands truth. The truth is we are at a breaking point. The two-state solution is farther than ever before. Excellencies, nothing can justify the horrific 7 October terror attacks by Hamas and the taking of hostages, both of which I have repeatedly condemned. And nothing can justify the obliteration of Gaza that has unfolded before the eyes of the world. The starvation of the population, the killing of tens of thousands of civilians, the further fragmentation of the occupied Palestinian territory, the relentless expansion of settlements, the surge in settler violence against Palestinians, the demolition of homes and forced displacement of populations, the changes to demographics on the ground, and the absence of any credible political solution. And the support, as expressed in a Knesset declaration voted last week, for annexing the occupied West Bank. Let's be clear. The creeping annexation of the occupied West Bank is illegal. It must stop. The wholesale destruction of Gaza is intolerable. It must stop. Unilateral actions that would forever undermine the two-state solution are unacceptable. They must stop. Excellencies, these are not isolated events. They are part of a systemic reality that is dismantling the building blocks of peace in the Middle East. And yet, precisely because of the grim realities, we must do even more to realize the two-state solution. Today's conference is a rare and indispensable opportunity. We must ensure that it does not become another exercise in well-meaning rhetoric. It can and must serve as a decisive turning point, one that catalyzes irreversible progress towards ending the occupation and realizing our shared aspiration for a viable two-state solution. The two-state solution remains the only framework rooted in international law, endorsed by the Assembly and supported by the international community. Specifically, Israel and Palestine, living side by side in peace and security, within secure and recognized borders on the basis of the pre-1967 lines, with Jerusalem as the capital of both states, in line with international law, UN resolutions, and other relevant agreements. Two independent, contiguous, democratic, and sovereign states, recognized by all and fully integrated into the international community. It is the only credible path to a just and lasting peace between Israelis and Palestinians. And it is the sine qua non for peace across the wider Middle East.
Excellencies, Israel, Palestine, and others will have to make difficult decisions on that path. Bold and principled leadership will be required on all sides. We are here to encourage and support that effort. Thank you for coming together to advance this essential cause for the people of Israel, Palestine, and all humanity. Thank you.
Je remercie le secrétaire.
I thank the Secretary General for his statement. I now invite His Excellency Mr. Mohammad Mustafa, Prime Minister of the State of Palestine, to deliver a statement.
Excellencies, distinguished delegations, I'm honored to be among you all today, and I wish to express the State of Palestine's deep gratitude for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and France for their leadership and for undertaking the responsibility entrusted to them by the General Assembly in co-chairing this historical international conference. I also express our deep appreciation to the co-chairs of the working groups for their dedication, also the President of the General Assembly and all states and organizations for their contributions. I'd like to thank the United Nations, represented by the President of the General Assembly and the Secretary General, and through them, all of the United Nations, for their relentless efforts to deliver on their sacred mandate, including the United Nations personnel on the ground who does so at the peril of their lives. Excellencies, this conference holds a promise, a pledge to the Palestinian people that the historical injustice that befell them must come to an end. What's happening in Gaza is its latest and most brutal manifestation, and we are all more than ever compelled to act. This conference is a message to the Palestinian people that the world supports us in the realization of our rights to life, liberty, dignity in our land, and of our right to our sovereign state. This conference is also a message to the Israeli people that there is a path to peace and regional integration. It will be achieved through our independence, not our destruction, through the realization of our rights, not their continued denial, that Palestinians are not condemned to perpetual occupation and exile, and Palestinians and Israelis are not doomed to be at eternal war, that there is another way, a better way, that leads to shared peace, shared security, and shared prosperity in our region. Not for one at the expense of the other, but for all. We hope they hear this message and grasp this historical opportunity. For very long, the idea was to leave the matter to the parties, relying solely on their goodwill. The result was entrenched occupation, an ever-worsening situation, and more violence and loss of innocent lives. The reality is that while the parties have their obligations and responsibilities, the rest of the world has also obligations and responsibilities in ensuring we achieve self-determination and just and lasting peace. Therefore, we welcome the approach taken by this conference to identify what's required from all actors and to promote concrete and decisive actions with clear mechanisms and time-bound commitments. All states have a responsibility to act now, to end the war on our people in Gaza and throughout the state of Palestine, to secure the release of all hostages and prisoners, to ensure the withdrawal of Israeli occupation forces. And we, of course, support in this regard the mediation efforts of Egypt, Qatar, and the United States, and the actions undertaken by all states to achieve these goals. The massacres and the engineered starvation by Israel must be brought to an immediate end. We all must act to reunify Gaza and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, with no occupation, no siege, no settlements, no forcible displacement, and no annexation, and to rebuild Gaza with and for our people. In the occupation, achieve Palestinian independence, and implement the two-state solution with Palestine and Israel living side by side in peace and security towards achieving regional peace, security, and prosperity. This requires support to the Palestinian government in assuming its sole governance and security responsibilities with regional and international support in the Gaza Strip and throughout Palestine. Hamas must end its rule of Gaza and hand over its weapons to the Palestinian Authority. And we stand ready to invite regional and international forces to be deployed in full coordination with the State of Palestine as a part of a stabilization and protection mission. With a Security Council mandate to provide protection to our people and ensure the ceasefire is observed by all parties, and to guarantee the security of all sides in support of the role of our government and our security forces, and not as an alternative to them. The ceasefire should be extended to all Palestine and should be accompanied with the cessation of all illegal measures. I call on all of you to take every action you can take to advance these goals, ending the war on our people, ending the occupation, achieving shared peace, security, and prosperity. I ask you to do that without delay or hesitation. Too much is at stake. We have demonstrated an ironclad commitment to peace in the face of brutal violence. With your help, we can demonstrate there is a peaceful path to liberation. In this regard, I salute the historic and courageous decision of France and President Macron to recognize the State of Palestine in September, and call on all those that have yet to do so to recognize the State of Palestine without delay. Indeed, the path to peace starts with recognizing the State of Palestine and preserving it from destruction, and by empowering the forces of peace in Palestine, Israel, and the region, and the world in their efforts to implement the two-state solution and achieve just and lasting peace, a peace that saves and serves Palestinians, Israelis, and the region. There is no viable alternative to the peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine. based on the relevant United Nations resolutions and the two-state solution on the 1967 lines. And there is no two-state solution without an independent Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. Every state represented here can do what they can, but they must act now to promote compliance and deter violations, to promote commitment, not indifference, to advance accountability, not impunity, to achieve just and lasting peace, not full perpetual occupation and conflict. The Palestinian government is determined to continue the implementation of substantive reforms in impossible circumstances. First and foremost, to be able to do better to serve our people, and also to better cooperate with our regional and international partners. We do not shy away from our obligations, and we are ready and willing to assure all our responsibilities in Gaza and the rest of the Palestine. We ask that you help put an end to the Israeli policies who, at the political, financial, and military levels, constitute an existential threat to our people, our state and its institutions, and to peace. The idea that peace and security can be achieved by the destruction or subjugation of our people is a deadly illusion. The only way forward is shared peace and security. Our people are not going to disappear, but they are losing lives and loved ones every single day. Commitments has to be given to secure their future. Communities are under attack by occupation forces and settlers to try to uproot them every single day. The Palestinian people have suffered for long and cannot be demanded to simply endure. Their agony must be brought to an end. Our people have an inalienable right to live in freedom and dignity in their ancestors' land. The region is ready to move forward now, but not at the expense of Palestine and the Palestinian people. The rights of all peoples must be respected. The sovereignty of all states must be ensured. Palestine and its people can no longer be the exception. Thank you.
Je remercie.
I thank the Prime Minister of the State of Palestine. And before closing the first part of our meeting, I suggest that we stand and observe a minute of silence in the memory of all of the victims of the tragedies that have been bereaving the region since the 7th of October 2023.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. I thank our guests for joining us on the rostrum this morning, and we will have a slight change on the podium before the first roundtable now.
أصحاب المعالي والسعادة حضرات المندوبين الموقرين أعلن انعقاد المائدة المستدامة.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we will now convene the first roundtable entitled The Case for Peace, Advancing the Two-State Solution Through Narrative Measures and International Law. Joining us at the podium for this segment of this meeting is Her Excellency Mary Robinson, former President of Ireland, former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, and former Chair of the Elders. We warmly welcome her presence today. In accordance with the program circulated, we will first hear interventions by the co-chairs of thematic working groups 3, 7, and 6. I would like to remind that all interventions are limited to 3 minutes and should be made from your seat. After the interventions by the co-chairs, we will hear a keynote address by our guest speaker.
أدعو الآن ممثلة أدعو الآن ممثل.
I now invite the distinguished representative of Qatar, His Excellency, to deliver his remarks for Working Group 3. Thank you, Your Highness, Excellencies. May the peace of God be upon you. First, at the outset, I would like to express our appreciation for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Republic of France for chairing this conference, and we appreciate the efforts made to prepare for this conference and the efforts of all the co-chairs of the conference working groups. Since the announcement of this conference, we have sought to support and actively play a role in this conference, and we chaired with Mexico and Canada the working group related to the case for peace. And this is an important topic for Qatar, where we have worked on justice, inclusivity, and peace, and establishing peace through dialogue and peaceful coexistence, and supporting development and education and the role of youth. The active participation of Working Group 3 in the conference came through the co-chairs, Qatar, Mexico, and Canada, making efforts over the last weeks to engage in a consultative process with stakeholders from member states and international organizations and non-governmental organizations by first developing a concept note on the narratives of peace and proposed questions to guide the discussion. We received written contributions from stakeholders in addition to oral contributions through the meetings that were held by the working group at the UN HQ last month. Based on this, we presented to the co-chairs of the conference a summary of what the specific proposals and projects that we agreed to. I would like to highlight a number of elements that were included in the deliberations of Working Group 3. First, it is clear that there is a consensus that peace narratives should be within a framework that is related to international law, human rights, and international resolutions, and that lasting peace can be established through a two-state solution, which includes the establishment of an independent Palestinian state on the borders of 1967 with East Jerusalem as its capital. Second, it was emphasized that there is a need to deal with the root causes of the conflict, in addition to recognizing the humanitarian suffering. It was also emphasized that the occupation cannot ensure security. One of the fundamental topics addressed by the working group is the need to build trust through mutual respect, coexistence, and humanitarian issues by focusing on these topics. Fourth, it was emphasized that measures should be taken against hate speech and incitement to violence. This needs to be dealt with. Fifth, some of the topics that were included was the importance of protecting independent media and journalists, and the need to combat disinformation. Sixth, the role of education was highlighted as essential for promoting peace. Seventh, it was noted that there is a need to engage active actors, specifically women and youth, and to have platforms and programs for dialogue between both parties. Eight, it was also included that we must benefit from previous successful experiences to promote peace. The essential role of civil society was also highlighted. In closing, we hope that the consultation meetings of the working group will lead the conference to take outcomes that will make sure that the international community will undertake its responsibilities regarding the Palestinian state to take future steps, and that this will be a basis for the work in the future, and that there needs to be an active follow-up for proposals and initiatives. We also look forward to have this conference participate in the establishment of an independent Palestinian state that is sovereign, geographically contiguous, with sovereignty on the borders of 1967, with East Jerusalem as its capital, that has international recognition and the UN membership that it deserves. Thank you.
شكرا والآن نعطي الكلمة.
Thank you. We now give the statement to the Minister for Canada.
Excellencies, delegates, distinguished guests, I would like to begin by thanking France and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for bringing us together at this critical moment. Painful realities that continue to tear at the fabric of the region. Escalating violence, devastating civilian casualties, hostages still in captivity, a deepening humanitarian crisis in Gaza, relentless settlement expansion in the West Bank, and the continued threat of terrorism. All of this making the prospects for peace feel more distant. Canada believes a two-state solution remains the only viable path to lasting peace for both Palestinians and Israelis. At the plenary session this afternoon, I will have more to say about Canada's position. We are here today because this moment demands political courage and resolve, and we must stand together and choose a different path, one that leads toward a sustainable and a just solution. And political agreements alone are not enough. We must also address the narratives shaping identity, perception, and legitimacy, as these lie at the heart of the conflict. As G7 President, Canada is engaging closely with regional partners, and the message is clear. The region must be defined by peace, by stability, and by dignity for all. Guided by this understanding, Canada, alongside Qatar and Mexico, is co-leading this Narrative for Peace working group, aimed at building an inclusive framework grounded in dignity and coexistence. Peace is not only about borders and agreements, it is also about shared stories and understanding that humanize all sides and foster trust. Canada is committed to initiatives that amplify voices of peace, promote understanding, and reject division. We support local mediation and peace-building efforts, empower youth and women leaders, and champion press freedom and inclusive dialogue. I would like to briefly mention two other working groups at this conference in which Canada is contributing also: the security sector and humanitarian action and reconstruction groups. En tant que principal contributeur,
as the main contributor to the Office for the Coordinator for Security since 2005, Canada advocates coordinated regional support, unified Palestinian governance, and cooperation in security with Israel. As I will mention this afternoon, on the humanitarian level, Canada prioritizes the protection of civilians, the improvement of humanitarian access, and reconstruction led by Palestinians focusing on transformations to enhance and strengthen Palestinian institutions.
Determined to work alongside our partners to deliver real, tangible solutions on the ground. And above all, Canada remains committed to a future where Palestinians and Israelis can live side by side in peace and dignity. Merci beaucoup.
أشكر معالي وزيرة خارجية كندا وأعطي الكلمة.
I thank the Foreign Minister of Canada, and I give the floor now to the Permanent Representative of Mexico.
Señores copresidentes,
Co-chairs, distinguished colleagues, Mexico expresses its deep appreciation to Qatar and Canada for their steadfast commitment to our working group that is tasked with exploring potential peace narratives that may contribute to the implementation of the two-state solution. On the basis of consultations held within our group, a broad consensus emerged around the idea that while diplomatic negotiations are a sine qua non for achieving a lasting resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, they must be accompanied by an effective peace narrative. Such a narrative, at the same time, should play a key role in shaping public discourse and influencing the way in which future generations are educated. A significant point of convergence among the contributions that we received is that education is one of the foremost factors to achieve and sustain peace. In this regard, allow me to highlight the following proposal. It is essential that both Palestinian and Israeli school curricula include history classes that emphasize the commonalities between both cultures. Likewise, initiatives aimed at fostering future peaceful coexistence between Palestinians and Israelis must be prioritized. We must prove that coexistence is possible. Perhaps the symphonic orchestra founded 26 years ago now by the Israeli conductor and pianist Daniel Barenboim and the Palestinian writer Edward Said, known as the West Eastern Divan Orchestra, is perhaps the best example of how both cultures can even produce high-quality art as a result of joint collaboration. Let's therefore begin our work this morning with the staunch belief that two states represent the only viable solution at this stage of what represents one of the great tragedies of history, and one which we bear the generational responsibility to resolve. Thank you very much.
شكرا سعادتكم.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I now invite the Foreign Minister of Brazil,
رئيس المشارك لمجموعة العمل السابعة,
the co-chair of Working Group 7, to deliver his remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Excellencies. Brazil co-chaired with Senegal Roundtable 7 on promoting respect for international law. The ordeal Palestinians face stands as a test to our collective commitment to international law, humanitarian law, and human rights, When confronted with credible allegations of genocide, invoking international law is not enough. We must enforce it with resolve. Last year, the International Court of Justice laid out clear guidelines on how states must fulfill their obligations regarding the unlawful occupation of Palestine. They include not recognizing the unlawful situation created by Israel's presence in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem, differentiating in all dealings with Israel between its territory and the occupied Palestinian territory, refraining from any action that may aid or contribute to maintaining occupation, and ensuring respect for the Palestinian people's right to self-determination and the Fourth Geneva Convention. Guided by the Court's opinion, Working Group 7 formulated 3 questions to inform Member States' action. First, what actions can states adopt to promote and ensure compliance with international law? Second, what accountability mechanisms can be activated to address relevant unlawful actions, policies, and practices, and to ensure reparation? Third, what preventive measures can be taken against illegal unilateral actions undermining the viability of the two-state solution? We received over 50 submissions from multiple stakeholders. These inputs generated 96 concrete proposals grouped in 5 areas: diplomatic and political, arms trade, economic, accountability and reparation, and monitoring. The following stood out: recognizing the State of Palestine and supporting its admission as a full UN member, upholding the legal distinction between Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory, opposing annexation and settlement expansion, ensuring protection for humanitarian workers, including UNRWA staff, supporting civil society and human rights defenders, imposing targeted sanctions against violent settlers and lawful countermeasures to grave violations. Excellencies, these are lawful actions that states can take now. The credibility of the international legal order depends on its non-selective application. What is now needed is the political will and a robust follow-up process to this conference. Let us turn law into action and action into justice and peace. I thank you.
شكرا معاليكم. نعطي.
Thank you. I now invite the Foreign Minister of Senegal, the co-chair of Working Group 7, to deliver her remarks.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is with an acute sense of responsibility that I stand alongside my counterpart from Brazil to present the results of Working Group 7. Without further ado, I will touch on the proposals that we received in the 4 other areas of action. In arms trade, contributors recommended strengthening the due diligence process, monitoring the final use and export controls. Some called for bilateral military embargoes in line with the Arms Trade Treaty. In terms of economic measures, proposals included restrictions on trade and from the settlements, the regulation and conduct in the private sector, and also looking at domestic legislation. Strengthening the UN database on companies in the settlements and technical and financial support to Palestinian companies, including for the reconstruction of Gaza, were also strongly promoted. In terms of accountability and reparations, both were highlighted. Cooperation with the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice, activation of universal jurisdiction, supporting the work of the Human Rights Council and the Independent Commission of Inquiry under the auspices of the United Nations. Several proponents also recommended the looking at the Convention on Crimes Against Humanity. In terms of monitoring, one of the main proposals made was resolving in the 12 months after the conference the voluntary reports describing the measures taken to implement international measures and to implement the results of the conference. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the restitution exercise is never easy, particularly in such a short time. Therefore, we would like to thank all of the parties that contributed to this process, which was inclusive and exhaustive in nature. The proposals that we received reflect a broadly shared understanding that of the erosion of international law in the occupied Palestinian territory, and the fact that this is a legal failure but also a moral and political one. It also reaffirmed a principles-based position, which is that of the primacy of law over might. This proposal is the only path towards lasting peace through a two-state solution anchored in international law, respecting the rights of the people of Palestine to self-determination and guaranteeing the right of both Palestinian and Israeli people. Thank you.
أشكر معالي وزيرة خارجية السنغال.
I thank the Foreign Minister of Senegal. I now invite the Deputy Foreign Minister of the Republic of Turkey, the co-chair of Working Group 7, to deliver the remarks of Working Group 6.
Esteemed ministers of co-chairing and participating states, excellencies, dear colleagues, I would like to thank France and Saudi Arabia for co-chairing the conference and all stakeholders, including civil society organizations, for their valuable contributions to the work of Working Group 6. I would like to thank our Irish colleagues for their excellent cooperation and the hard work they put into our efforts to co-chair our working group. I wish also to take this opportunity to welcome the announcement of France to recognize the State of Palestine. We sincerely hope that many others will follow suit soon. Before sharing with you the priorities and recommendations that came out of the submissions in our working group, allow me to share with you some general observations regarding our deliberations. Firstly, we have seen the strong desire among the stakeholders to contribute to ending the decades-long suffering of the Palestinian people. Contributions received highlighted the areas where concrete action is needed to realize this vision. There were submissions rightfully proposing programs to help build capacity in the Palestinian Authority. Yet, empowering the State of Palestine calls for addressing the urgent question of how to end the Israeli occupation. Therefore, the root cause is still there. During our deliberations, it was a recurring view that the continued occupation is the main obstacle on the way to Palestinian statehood. While the annexation of Palestinian territories by Israel is looming, as called for by the Israeli parliament on July 23rd, our tools should be proportionally strong and effective. Some stakeholders made submissions proposing the establishment of mechanisms to enforce international law and international humanitarian law. We also observed that the addition to the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza, illegal settlements, confiscation of land, house demolitions by Israel in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, also call for urgent action. Some stakeholders emphasized that measures, including sanctions, should be imposed against settlers in the occupied Palestinian territory. Israel may also be subjected to coercive measures as it is the enabler of the illegal settlements. The acts of Israel to displace, dislocate, and expel Palestinian people from their homeland should be prevented without any delay. We cannot envisage the state of Palestine without the Palestinian nation. The core priorities that came out of the submissions can be listed as follows. First, implementation of the two-state solution. Second, recognition of the State of Palestine and the admission of the State of Palestine as a full member in the UN. Third, humanitarian and reconstruction efforts in Gaza. Fourth, institutional development. Fifth, halting settlement expansion and forced displacement. 6, accountability and the rule of law. 7, civil society engagement. 8, security guarantees for both people. The submissions send a clear message. The international community must act urgently and decisively to preserve the two-state vision, to uphold legal and humanitarian principles, and to move beyond expressions concerned to activating mechanisms of accountability. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Turkey, and I now invite Her Excellency Emir Higgins, Minister of State at the Department of Public Expenditure, Infrastructure, Public Service Reform and Digitalization of Ireland and co-chair of Working Group 6.
I would like to begin at the outset by thanking France and Saudi Arabia for all of their work to date, and to all of the co-chairs and their teams for all of their work, including our own team in Ireland. I'd also like to thank Minister Yilmaz and express my appreciation to Turkey for their excellent cooperation. I'm delighted that former President of Ireland, Mary Robinson, is here with us today, and I thank her for her decades of dedication to the protection of human rights. This conference, delegates, is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to bring a renewed sense of urgency and to demonstrate a spirit of shared responsibility for seeking a political situation to this absolutely devastating conflict. The humanitarian situation in Gaza has reached new depths of despair and new depths of misery. Mass starvation is now spreading right across the population, and that is an affront to our collective humanity. We need to see an immediate ceasefire, we need to see an immediate release of hostages, and we need to see massive humanitarian aid into Gaza at scale. As co-chairs of Working Group 6, Ireland and Turkey engaged broadly with member states and stakeholders. Our working group was on the preservation of the two-state solution. We deeply appreciate the significant number of concrete and of action-orientated submissions, and there was strong agreement around the respect for international law, including international humanitarian law, and clear support for accountability mechanisms, including the International Criminal Court. Submissions reference the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice and its clear finding that the Israeli occupation of the occupied Palestinian territory is unlawful. Member states and stakeholders affirmed the two-state solution as the only pathway to a just and a lasting peace, and that is in accordance with international law and UN resolutions. The importance of recognition of the State of Palestine and its admission as a full UN member state was a recurring theme, and I commend France and President Macron for leadership on this. We also recall the importance of recognition of Israel by states who have not yet to do so, and of integration of Israel and Palestine in the region. Contributions stress there should be no forced displacement of Palestinians from Gaza, and there was strong consensus on the need to address illegal settlements in West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and strong condemnation of any attempts at annexation. There must be accountability for violent settlers and for those who support and for those who facilitate them. There must also be accountability for Hamas, who have brought only suffering to Israelis and Palestinians. A key issue is support for the Palestinian Authority, governing a unified Palestine state, support for the PA's reform agenda and sustainable financing, including the release of revenues by Israel. We acknowledge the Arab and OIC reconstruction plan as the basis for work on the rebuilding of Gaza and the necessary arrangements for governance, for security and for economic development. Submissions stressed that the essential and life-saving role and the mandate of UNRWA must be protected. As a country with experience of overcoming conflict, Ireland recognises the important role of both civil society and in particular of women in laying the groundwork for peace. We must create the conditions and the space for voices from different perspectives to be heard in safety and in respect. We must now seize this opportunity to end the devastating cycles of violence and make good on our commitments to implement once and for all the two-state solution in the interest of both Israelis and Palestinians. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Ireland. لقد استمعنا إلى
We have heard from the co-chairs scheduled to speak under Roundtable 1. It is now my honor to invite our guest speaker, Her Excellency Mary Robinson, former President of Ireland, former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, and former Chair of the Elders, to deliver the keynote address on law, legitimacy, and the long arc of peace.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to speak to you today as a member of the Elders, the group of independent leaders founded by Nelson Mandela in 2007. I'd like to thank the co-chairs, France and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, for convening today's conference and for the invitation. Since the Elders' founding, we've worked to support a peaceful and just resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I share the anger and despair felt by so many around the world who feel powerless to stop the atrocities we are witnessing in Gaza. The level of human suffering and destruction is unconscionable. Occupation and violence have reached new depths of inhumanity over the past 2 years, from the horrific Hamas attacks of the 7th of October 2023 and the taking of Israeli hostages, to Israel's collective punishment of Palestinians in Gaza, including indiscriminate bombardments, repeated mass displacement, and the use of starvation as a weapon of war. International norms and standards are being abandoned and openly scorned. This conference must be a turning point towards a different future. As political decision makers, you have the power and responsibility to compel a change of course. It's time for collective action, starting with recognition of the State of Palestine as a transformative step that should be taken now. Why now? Because the dehumanizing of the Palestinians by the extremist government of Israel has reached a critical point. Let us recall that Prime Minister Netanyahu telephoned Pope Leo to apologize for the injury to Father Gabriel Ramanelli when the Catholic Church was bombed in Gaza. Prime Minister Netanyahu has not apologized for the more than 17,000 children killed in Gaza, or the many more children left without limbs and without family members. He has not apologized for all the children of Gaza who have been traumatized by this totally disproportionate war and are now hungry to the point of starvation. No apology has been deemed necessary because the children of Gaza have become dehumanized by this Israeli government. I welcome President Macron's announcement that France will recognize Palestine. The United Kingdom has said it will recognize Palestine when it would be an effective and not just a symbolic step. Surely this is the moment, because later it will simply be too late. Excellencies, I would now like to address two issues. First, measures to uphold international law and end impunity for systematic violations. And second, how to help lay the groundwork for peace. It is my personal view that we are seeing an unfolding genocide in Gaza. It is for international courts to make a final determination. But member states cannot wait for this. You must act now to prevent genocide. I must say I'm particularly impressed by the recommendations put forward here this morning by the co-chairs of working groups 7 and 6. In its advisory opinion, the International Court of Justice has found that Israel's policies and actions in the West Bank constitute annexation and breach of its international obligations on racial segregation and apartheid. For those of us who believe in international law and the United Nations Charter, the stark truth is that the government of Israel has not been held accountable for its violations in Gaza and across the occupied Palestinian territory. Its leadership enjoys a high level of impunity, and measures taken to date have not been sufficient to incentivize a change of course. This cannot continue. We have a shared duty to uphold the international rule of law and guard against the erosion of basic norms that guide conduct in wartime. There are practical steps that member states should take now to end impunity and give effect to the International Court of Justice's advisory opinion, halting arms transfers, expanding targeted sanctions, and moving to suspend trade cooperation. There must be an immediate halt to arms transfers and any military, security, or other form of cooperation which assists in maintaining Israel's unlawful presence and actions in the occupied Palestinian territory. The International Court of Justice advisory opinion clarified that Israel's security concerns do not justify its illegal presence in the West Bank and Gaza, or the annexation of territory. Self-defense cannot be invoked as justification for supplying arms when the use of force is unlawful or there is an overwhelming evidence of atrocity crimes. Ensuring the security of Israelis is central to finding a lasting solution, but this cannot be achieved when arms are used to perpetuate an unlawful occupation and atrocity crimes are fueling grievances on a colossal scale. Of course, there must also be accountability for systematic violations of international law by Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups, including the continued holding of Israeli hostages. It is right that member states have strengthened sanctions against Hamas in response to its atrocity crimes against Israeli civilians. The right of the Palestinian people to resist an unlawful occupation can never justify targeting civilians in Israel. Member states should also act collectively to expand targeted sanctions against the Israeli leaders responsible for systematic violations of international law in Gaza and the West Bank. I commend the governments of Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Norway, and the United Kingdom for imposing targeted sanctions in response to the dangerous rhetoric of some Israeli ministers. To achieve greater impact, governments must work together to build on this and put in place a robust set of targeted sanctions. Sanctions should continue to be strengthened against violent settlers and non-state entities funding and supporting illegal settlements. But let us be clear, it is the government of Israel that is driving settlement creation and expansion. This is not a recent initiative of a few extremist ministers. It is an enterprise that has been advanced by successive Israeli governments over many decades in clear violation of international law. Member states should expand sanctions and other measures in response to the announcement of new settlements, such as the recent revival of the E1 settlement plan, which would sever the West Bank in two. It's also high time for member states to cease any assistance to or trade with illegal settlements. I particularly welcome the recent decision of my own country, Ireland, to advance legislation on this. I urge other states to follow suit. All existing and future trade cooperation with Israel should be reviewed with a view to suspension. Maintaining preferential trade access in such a context cannot be justified. It is deeply disappointing that European Union members have still taken no collective concrete action in response to Israel's persistent violations of Article 2 of the EU-Israel Association Agreement. Excellencies, measures to end Israel's impunity, including the ICC arrest warrants, which should be enforced, are not anti-Semitic. They are a necessary response to actions of the government of Israel, which are opposed by many sections of Israeli society. the elders stand in solidarity with the growing number of Israelis who both want the hostages to be released by Hamas and the humanitarian crisis and war in Gaza to end. We are seeing acts of extraordinary courage from Israelis and Palestinians who have suffered deep trauma and loss, but who are challenging extremist narratives within their own societies, recognizing the humanity in each other, and working to forge a common vision of a shared future. Just today, 2 Israeli human rights organizations, B'Tselem and Physicians for Human Rights, have issued reports saying Israel is committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza, and Western countries have a legal and moral duty to stop it. Creating the conditions of peace requires challenging the dehumanizing rhetoric and incitement on both sides that fuels hatred and legitimizes violence. Women have a particular role to play in peace building. In Northern Ireland, they came out of their housing estates and reached across the divide. Women are likewise at the forefront of many of the peace efforts in Israel and Palestine, leading civil society initiatives and creating partnerships for peace. At the political level, the Arab OIC plan for Gaza's reconstruction and recovery offers a pathway that can pave the way for a fully sovereign, unified Palestinian state, with an end to occupation and all forms of violence against civilians as part of a sustainable 2-state solution. Articulating this path in a way that engages both Israelis and Palestinians on the viability of an alternative, secure and hopeful future is essential. The arc of peace is indeed long in this region, but with collective action to apply international law, it bends towards justice. Thank you.
Thank you, and I now open Roundtable 2, entitled 2 States, 1 Future, Delivering Sovereignty, Guaranteeing Security for All, and Economic Viability. Joining us on the podium is His Excellency Juan Manuel Santos Calderón, former President of Colombia, 2016 Nobel Peace Prize laureate and Chair of the Elders. We warmly welcome his presence today. We will first hear interventions by the co-chairs of thematic working groups 1, 4 and 2. Immediately thereafter, we will hear an address from our guest speaker. I now invite the representative of Jordan, His Excellency Ayman Safadi, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs and Expatriates of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, to take the floor.
Thank you so much, Excellencies, dear friends. Allow me to start by thanking our co-chairs, His Highness Prince Faisal and His Excellency John Noel Barrot, for their leadership and for their commitment and for their relentless effort to bring us together today in what is clearly an extremely important event to express our commitment to lasting and comprehensive peace in the region. I will express Jordan's position in my intervention at the panel, but now I'll just summarize the outcome of our working group, which I had the honor of co-chairing with my dear friend, the Foreign Minister of Spain. And basically, I think what the group showed that we are all committed to a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace on the basis of the 2-state solution. We're all committed to the 2-state solution as the only path going forward. And that now is the time to act, because if we do not, realities on the ground are rendering that solution inviable as every day goes by. We, I think, agreed that recognizing the Palestinian state is a must. And to those who argue that this should be the outcome of negotiation, where are the negotiations? there is no negotiation. The Palestinians are ready to negotiate today. We do not have an Israeli partner to negotiate. So if they're not willing to sit at the table and negotiate a two-state solution, which the whole world agrees is the path forward, then they cannot veto us from doing what we all believe in and recognize the Palestinian state as a statement of commitment to that solution. I think majority in the group, and I thank everybody who participated in it, also expressed the importance of recognizing Palestine as a full member of our United Nations so that we can move forward. And I think it was clear among all of us that we've got to act to stop Israeli unilateral actions that undermine the two-state solution, including settlements, land confiscation, encroachments on the holy sites, and attempts to change the demographic composition of the West Bank and Gaza. That is also something that I think resonated among all of us in the group. So to sum up, I think what we all agreed on is that we've got to act and act quickly in accordance with our conviction that the two-state solution is the only path forward, and we've got to recognize Palestinian state, and we've got to take action, practical action to move in that direction. And if I may just add one element here is that if we all agree that the two-state solution is the path forward, and we all know who is the party that is preventing us from moving forward, then it is about time that the world took action against that party, which is Israel, that is not allowing the realization of the two-state solution. Again, I think we all agreed that this is not time to talk, this is time to act, and we have to act efficiently and act quickly. And before I conclude, allow me just to say what I should have started with, which is the catastrophe on Gaza cannot continue. It is incomprehensible that in this day and age, all of us are failing to ensure that children eat, drink, have medicine. So I think I urge all of you to act in every way possible, to stand, to speak against the prevention of Israel of allowing aid into Gaza. That has got to stop. By the time we finish our meeting today, tens of Palestinians will have died from starvation. That cannot stand. So please, let's stand on the side of justice, stand on the right of what's right, stand on the right of international law, which our group also emphasized that must be implemented equally to all. Thank you so much.
I thank His Excellency Ayman Safadi, and I now invite the representative of Spain, His Excellency José Manuel Álvarez Bueno, Minister for Foreign Affairs, European Union and Cooperation of Spain, co-chair of Working Group 1, to take the floor.
Thank you very much. I commend Prince Faisal and Jean-Noël Varro for the work they are doing, and of course my good friend Ayman Safadi that has co-chaired this group. I will continue in Spanish. Hoy seguimos.
Today we continue to make progress on what is the only possible path towards peace in the region, and so that we don't have a repetition of this cycle of violence that we are currently witnessing, which is the worst one in the longest-standing conflict that the United Nations has on its agenda. And I'd like to recall that the first peace mission in the history of this organization was in Palestine, and we're still here in a situation that is more serious than ever. Right now we have tens of thousands of people dead, more than 100,000 people wounded, and we have to work for the implementation of the two-state solution, which is the only way to work for lasting peace in the Middle East. The working group that I co-chaired with Minister Safadi made it clear that we cannot go back to the status quo before the 7th of October. We need to flesh out the two-state solution. That is the only possible path and the objective of this conference. At the same time, there is broad agreement that we must make progress on establishing the statehood of Palestine, beginning with recognition of the state of Palestine, as 149 UN member states have already done, and also to work for its admission as a fully fledged member of this organization. It is also essential that the full normalization of relations of everyone with Israel and its full integration into the region be reaffirmed. The conclusions of the group also recall that the Palestinian Authority is the only legitimate actor to ensure the future governance of the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian Authority is our partner for peace, and we have to lay the groundwork for a realistic, viable Palestinian state with Gaza and the West Bank under a single national Palestinian Authority with territorial contiguity connected through a land corridor with access to the sea and a port in Gaza and with its capital in East Jerusalem. And in the face of the unbearable humanitarian catastrophe generated by Israel's military offensive, which has been going on for 20 months now, we clearly demand the mass unhindered entry of humanitarian assistance, its distribution in accordance with humanitarian principles and via key humanitarian actors, first and foremost the United Nations and its agencies, and in particular UNRWA. And lastly, we recognize the need to comply with international law and international humanitarian law, with resolutions of the United Nations Security Council, with the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice of the 19th of July 2024, and we cannot accept unilateral decisions that obstruct the viability of this two-state solution. We cannot accept settler violence. We cannot accept forced displacement, successive waves of forced displacement. And if there is a violation of the legal framework that we ourselves have voted for and which is binding upon all of us and also on Israel, then the relevant responsibility should be pursued. Thank you very much.
Je remercie son
I thank His Excellency José Manuel Alvarez, and I now invite the representative of Norway, His Excellency Espen Barth Eide, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Norway and co-chair of Working Group 4, to take the floor.
Thank you, dear Jean-Noël Barrot. Thank you also, His Highness Prince Faisal Al Farhan, for bringing us together here and for convening this important roundtable. And together this morning, we are focusing on the pillars of Palestinian statehood, the foundations for freedom and independence, a sovereign state, as Jordan and Spain just talked about, the security of Palestinians and Israelis alike, as we will hear more about afterwards, and now on the economic viability of the state. Working Group 4, which Norway has had the pleasure of leading together with our good friends from Japan, and thank you for the excellent cooperation, has been working on this theme. But all these issues, friends, are interlinked. Right now, and as laid out by Prime Minister Mustafa, there is an acute economic crisis in Palestine, threatening the very foundations of the state, the fabric of life, with the running of schools and hospitals and all public services, frankly, everything that has been built over the last 30 years. We need to stop this bleeding. Stop Israel from holding back clearance revenue transfers. Stop access and movement restrictions. Stop the expansion of settlement activities, which are confiscating land, hindering agricultural activity, and hindering trade and economic progress. While we should not bail out Israel, donors must stand by Palestine through direct support of the government in this critical situation. This is one of our group's strong recommendations. Therefore, I announce today an additional budget support of approximately $20 million US, and I call on others to do the same. But what is causing this economic crisis is not only the ongoing military activity. It is structural. It is political. With UN membership for the state of Palestine being blocked, the Palestine government does not have the same toolbox as other governments. The working group therefore supports the full integration of Palestine into the international monetary and financial system, the unification of Palestinian territory under a single governance structure is also highlighted by the group, as it would have immediate positive economic implications. And of course, the working group is clear that economic initiatives or incentives can only complement, not replace, the political process. There is no such thing as an isolated economic peace. It has to be part of a broader solution. Our discussions has drawn on earlier outcomes of the AHLC meetings, the Ad Hoc Liaison Committee, which, by the way, has been ad hoc for 31 or 32 years, and the Global Alliance for the Implementation of the Two-State Solution, and we will continue our work in both. During the upcoming UNRWA High-Level Week in September, Norway will call again for a ministerial HALC meeting at ministerial level, and there will be an opportunity to elaborate more on this issue. And before I end, Chair, I would like to associate myself completely with the point just made by my good friend Ayman Safadi, the Foreign Minister of Jordan, that a key message from this conference has to be that absent any real negotiations, we cannot allow the continuation of the Israeli veto. It's like a reverse walkover. If you don't turn up to the match, if you don't turn up to the negotiation, nothing happens. That cannot continue. Israel, of course, is a sovereign nation with right of full responsibility of its recognized territory, but it cannot have a veto over the lands that it illegally occupies. Here, the international community, the world, has a voice, and we must stand together to use that voice to make a clear statement with both all the political implications and all the practical detail that that entails. And thank you for the attention.
Je remercie.
I thank His Excellency Espen Barth Aid for his statement, and I now invite the representative of Japan, His Excellency Tsukasa Uemura, Special Representative of the Government of Japan and Special Envoy of the Government of Japan for Peace in the Middle East, and co-chair of Working Group 4, to take the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First, we'd like to express our sincere gratitude to France and Saudi Arabia for leading this high-level conference. And also, we appreciate many meaningful contributions made by all member states and international organizations. As for our working group, I don't have much to add what His Excellency, the Norway Minister Eide-san, just described. I may touch upon only a few points. Our working group recognizes the importance of reforms led by the Palestinian Authority, and as well as how to strengthen the economic viability, macroeconomics, and fiscal foundations. In doing so, the World Bank and the international financial groups will play an indispensable role in achieving fiscal stability in Palestine. Based on this, we have identified 4 key areas for concrete action in the outcome document and have proposed some recommendations for each. For details, the document will be available I understand, in the afternoon. Dear colleagues, realizing peace in the Middle East is not only essential for regional stability, but also a matter of international peace and security. Even now, the people of Gaza are facing a severe crisis of hunger and malnutrition. It is essential that the ceasefire be restored as soon as possible. Through this high-level conference, it is vital to reaffirm the need for a two-state solution and to place this issue back at the forefront of the political agenda. Lastly, Japan will remain actively involved in the early recovery and reconstruction of Gaza, drawing our own sad experience in recovering from World War II and numerous natural disasters in the past. We are determined to continue providing tangible and meaningful assistance to the most vulnerable. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency Tsukasa Uemura, and I now invite the representative of Indonesia, His Excellency Aminata Nasir, Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs of Indonesia and co-chair of Working Group 2, to take the floor.
Thank you, co-chairs. Excellencies, colleagues, I thank France and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for convening this meeting. We have invested significant time and efforts in building towards this high-level conference. We therefore must ensure the momentum in realizing the two-state solution is maintained after the conference, including not to veto the full membership of the State of Palestine to the UN, as stated by a number of colleagues earlier. Co-chairs, Excellencies, Indonesia is honored to co-chair with Italy Working Group 2 on security. Our inclusive and transparent approach in Working Group 2 is anchored in two central objectives. First, to identify security guarantees for Israelis and Palestinians in full respect of the sovereignty of all states. And second, to identify the scope and the task of a stabilization or protection mission deployed under the aegis of the United Nations at the request of the Palestinian Authority and backed by the UN Security Council. We have received 30 submissions from member states, international organizations, and stakeholders. Based on these inputs, Indonesia and Italy have identified 4 main topics. First, establishing credible and equal security guarantees for both parties through cessation of violence and recognition of equal rights to safety is important. This includes actions to support immediate and permanent ceasefire, a critical element for any actions to ensure the security of both peoples. Another important action that have been proposed by member states are actions to create and support a Palestinian-owned transitional authority in Gaza in line with the Arab Group OIC reconstruction plan. Member states also propose the importance of an inclusive regional security architecture modeled after the OSCE in Europe and ASEAN in Southeast Asia to create a mechanism to nurture trust, peace in the region. Second, we need to empower the Palestinian Authority to independently manage security and fully assume responsibility in both Gaza and the West Bank, with the view of promoting reunification of all Palestinian Authority under a single, legitimate, and democratic national government. Under this element, we have gathered commitment to take action to launch a UN-led international coordination framework for initiatives aimed at developing efficient security and policing structure towards a sovereign Palestinian state. Member states also called for actions to devise a structured framework to transfer international security responsibility to the Palestinian Authority security forces. This includes actions to support the Palestinian Authority to maintain a base-level security on the ground and to ensure the safe passage of humanitarian aid. Lastly, there has been a strong consensus in restating opposition to forced displacement or changes to Gaza demographic and territorial status, as well as the rest of the OPT, including East Jerusalem. These actions are aimed to ensure a physical and normative space for the two-state solution to materialize. The 2 other elements will be presented by my fellow co-chairs from Italy. Before I conclude, however, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate France for its leadership and courageous decision to recognize the State of Palestine. At a time when persuasion fails to persuade parties to stop actions that are clearly in violation of various international law, only concrete action within one's own power and international law is needed to show the right path. Indonesia urges other countries and leaders that have not to take this momentum towards our goal in two-state solution by following the example of France. I thank you.
Je remercie son Excellence.
I thank His Excellency Al-Manat al-Nasir, and I invite the representative of Italy, Her Excellency Maria Tripodi, Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Italy, and co-chair of Working Group 2, to take the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Minister Faisal, dear colleagues. This conference represents a collective call to action to which the Italian government has committed with resolve and determination, and we thank Saudi Arabia and France for having promoted this. The continuation of military operations, the dire humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip, as well as Hamas' rejection of the latest negotiating proposal and the instability in the West Bank pose a very serious task that is crucial, however. We have co-chaired together with Indonesia the working group on security, which I believe is central to the two-state perspective. Addressing the security needs of both Israelis and Palestinians is a prerequisite for any political progress and is the cornerstone of regional stability. I would like to thank all UN member states, the European Union, the Arab League, civil society, and the Palestinian Authority for their valuable contributions, 30, that came to our group. We immediately agreed with our Indonesian colleagues a basic premise. Just as there can be no peace without security, there can be no security without peace. That's why the third focus of our work is on confidence building between Israelis and Palestinians, recognizing that a solid security architecture must be grounded in policy, in agreements and negotiations, and not solely on military arrangements. It's an ambitious project, but not undoable, as shown by the effective deployment of the EU's U-bomb Rafah mission during the ceasefire. Ensuring the feasibility of the concrete actions outlined earlier by Deputy Minister Nasir requires the engagement from regional actors in the international community. Tasked with defining the purpose and mandate of a stabilization and protection mission of the UN, the group's fourth and final topic concerned international protection mechanisms and the role of the UN. The consent of both parties, the invitation of the Palestinian Authority, and a Security Council resolution are essential conditions for any stabilization mission in Gaza and for any monitoring effort in the West Bank. The work carried out with Indonesia and other member states has followed a phase strategy with short, medium, and long-term goals, allowing flexibility in our work and always keeping in mind potential developments on the ground. We are ready to work with Indonesia and others to implement the identified actions. Our immediate priorities are a ceasefire and humanitarian access. Strengthening the institutions and security capabilities of the Palestinian Authority is yet another short-term goal. Italy firmly believes that the two-state solution represents the meeting point between Israel's security needs and the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people. Only from a Gaza Strip free of Hamas and reunited with the West Bank under a reformed and empowered Palestinian Authority can we see a genuine reconstruction process in line with what was proposed by the Arab Islamic peace plan. Reconstruction means not just physical infrastructure, buildings, schools, hospitals, but most importantly, rebuilding trust between Israelis and Palestinians. I would like to therefore conclude by stressing the importance of aligning international support with the work of the civil societies of Israel and Palestine, the only true guarantee of a lasting and stable peace in the long term. Thank you.
I thank Her Excellency Maria Tripodi for her statement. We've now heard from the co-chairs scheduled to speak under Roundtable 2. It's now my honor to invite our guest speaker for Roundtable 2, His Excellency Juan Manuel Santos Calderon, former President of Colombia, 2016 Nobel Peace Prize laureate, and Chair of the Elders, to deliver the keynote address on delivering peace, political resolution, shared security, and economic prosperity.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to address this conference today in my capacity as Chair of the Elders, and would like to thank the conference co-chairs for the opportunity to speak to this distinguished audience. Recognition of the State of Palestine can be a transformative step towards peace at a time when the region is consumed by terrible war. I encourage the remaining UN member states who have not already done so to take this step now. I commend President Macron for announcing that France will recognize Palestine. I urge the United Kingdom, a country for which I have a special gratitude for its support of the Colombian peace agreement and as penholder in the Security Council, to join France in leading the way. I took this decision in 2018 as President of Colombia. I did so not to favor one side over the other, but to help create a level playing field, convinced then, as I am now, that it is for the best in the long run, also for the Jewish people, for whom I have always expressed admiration and respect. Unfortunately, I cannot say the same for the current Israeli government. As I said at the time, just like the Palestinian people have a right to build an independent state, the people of Israel have a right to live in peace next to their neighbors. Now, it is more important than ever to achieve this, following the horrific Hamas terror attacks against Israeli civilians on 7th of October 2023, and the current government of Israel's atrocity crimes against Palestinians in Gaza that we are all witnessing today. In words and deeds, Prime Minister Netanyahu's government openly expresses its intent to prevent a Palestinian state ever coming into existence. It is pursuing a greater Israel through the destruction of Gaza, an illegal settlement expansion, and annexation of the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. At this crucial moment, recognition of the State of Palestine by even more countries would send a clear signal to the Israeli people that this expansionist agenda will never be accepted by the international community, and it does not serve their true interest. I urge member states to stand with the many Israelis who reject this dangerous path and who understand that their own security depends on the security and self-determination of Palestinians. Some will always make the argument that the time is not yet right. At this critical juncture, the case for recognition has never been more pressing. The time is now. Recognizing Palestine along pre-1967 lines can be a catalytic act towards the vision of two states with a shared future, if there is sustained political commitment to follow through on its implementation. This is about the core principles of justice and self-determination. Recognition should not be linked to negotiations between the conflict parties. Israel does not have the right to veto Palestinian self-determination or statehood. Nor should recognition be linked to governance reform or the form that a sovereign, unified Palestinian state will take. These are separate issues from statehood itself. The question of when and how Hamas should disarm or be disarmed is, with no doubt, critical. I know from my own experience of ending a more than 50-year-old war in Colombia how delicate but essential such a process can be. The disarmament of Hamas will need to be addressed as part of a process towards a lasting political settlement that ends the occupation and ensures security for both people. For Hamas to have any political future, it must be willing to reconcile under the umbrella of a revitalized Palestinian Liberation Organization based on fundamental commitments, including recognition of Israel along pre-1967 lines and an end to attacks against civilians. Like any other state, the state of Palestine must have full control of its own borders, territory, and security arrangements. A two-state solution will not be viable or sustainable if Palestinians are offered a reduced form of statehood that falls short of full sovereignty. For too long, the security of the occupying power, Israel, has been prioritized over the security of Palestinians. This is obvious from the continuous flow of arms to Israel, while the civilian population of Gaza suffers endless bombardments and a siege that has led to an imminent man-made famine. Distinguished co-chairs and distinguished delegates, I know from my country's own experience of conflict with the FARC and other armed groups that it can seem easier to wage war than to make peace. But such intractable conflicts can never be resolved by military means alone. Today, I urge you all to take a firmer stand against military aggression in Gaza and the West Bank, but also in the wider region. The situation remains extremely fragile following the military strikes against Iran by Israel and the USA, which deliberately derailed progress towards a political solution to the Iran nuclear threat and led to a dangerous escalation. It is vital to preserve space for political dialogues on this issue. European governments should negotiate a delay to the UN sanctions snapback deadline, and Iran should restore the International Atomic Energy Agency access. Any UN Security Council resolution underpinning a new agreement must also provide guarantees to Iran against further strikes. The government of Israel's military action in Syria since the fall of Assad also undermines regional stability. This is not legitimate self-defense. The use of force to assert Israel's domination in the region risks leading to a dangerous endgame. This is relevant to our discussions today because it directly undermines prospects for a two-state solution. We need a new vision for regional peace and security, one that is based on political, not military solutions, and respect for each state's sovereignty. A comprehensive regional framework must be inclusive of Iran as well as the Arab states. It must have a lasting settlement that safeguards a fully sovereign state of Palestine alongside the state of Israel at its heart. Only a framework in which all states in the region have an equal stake can provide lasting peace. Like others, the elders want to see a regional security context in which Israel has normalized relations with its neighbors and is recognized by all countries in the world. However, normalization through the pursuit of more Abraham Accords without self-determination for Palestinians will only sow the seeds of future conflict, ultimately undermining Israel's own security. Full normalization must be conditional on Israel's ending the occupation with recognition and realization of a sovereign Palestinian state along the pre-1967 lines. To make progress towards such a vision, it is likely that a regional or international presence will be required to support a ceasefire in Gaza and the transitional governance and security arrangements that will follow. Any such regional and international presence should be based on the consent of the Palestinian Authority and endorsed by the UN. It should be established in both Gaza and the West Bank to ensure that it paves the way for a unified, sovereign Palestinian state. Recognition of the state of Palestine by member states can be transformative if it is accompanied by practical measures to make statehood a reality. This includes support for Palestinian economic sovereignty and prosperity, ending the movement and access restrictions that constrain economic development, and opening up the potential for cooperative arrangements between Israel and the future state of Palestine to address shared challenges such as public health, water resources, and the climate crisis. Excellencies, I would like to conclude by recalling Nelson Mandela's words nearly 30 years ago when I went to give him the chair of the 9th UNCTAD conference, when he told me that without peace, Colombia will never take off. His words inspired me to commit to delivering peace in my country and in the world, and still inspire me today. That is the reason I am here. This conference offers a tangible opportunity to catalyze progress towards political resolution by recognizing Palestine and developing a new vision for shared security and sustainable economic prosperity for Palestinians, Israelis, and the wider region. I urge you all to seize this moment. Thank you.
Je remercie son...
I thank His Excellency Juan Manuel Santos Calderon.
Merci. أعلن
I now announce Roundtable 3, entitled From Rubble to Renewal, Rebuilding Lives, Realizing the Promise of Independence, and a Future of Shared Peace, Security, and Prosperity. Joining us on the podium is His Highness Prince Zaid Raad Al Hussein, former United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, and we warmly welcome his presence with us today. We'll first hear interventions by the co-chairs of thematic working groups 5 and 8, and I now give the floor to His Excellency the Foreign Minister of the Arab Republic of Egypt and the co-chair of Working Group 5. You have the floor, sir.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.
In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, Your Highness Prince Faisal bin Farhan, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Your Excellency Minister Jean-Noël Barrot, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the French Republic, Your Highness Prince Raad, ladies and gentlemen, allow me at the outset to express my extreme gratitude for your participation in today's meeting at the beginning of the conference on the peaceful political settlement of the Palestinian question and the implementation of the two-state solution. Here I'd like to express my special thanks to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and to the Republic of France for co-chairing this conference and for their keenness to convene it at this very delicate and dangerous moment in our region's history. And I also like to thank all the countries that participated in the working groups. Their valuable participation and contributions will undoubtedly have a great impact in ensuring the success of our joint efforts in this conference. Distinguished guests, the importance of our meeting today is not simply limited to expressing our interest in a just and comprehensive peaceful settlement of the central issue in the Middle East, namely the question of Palestine. Rather, our meeting today gains importance from our success in reaching the broadest possible international consensus on the practical steps needed to establish a Palestinian state on the 4 June 1967 lines, with East Jerusalem as its capital, a state living in peace and security side by side with Israel. Here, Egypt, and through its participation in the co-chairmanship of the Fifth Working Group alongside the United Kingdom, we took care to incorporate all the contributions received and formulate them with the utmost balance between all the different visions, while presenting our own vision with regards to the disastrous humanitarian situation in the occupied territories, be they in the West Bank or the Gaza Strip. This is a vision that we believe has won the acceptance and support of the majority of the countries participating in the Humanitarian Action Working Group as one of the main pillars of any practical action aimed at providing the objective conditions necessary for the establishment of a Palestinian state, which is based on supporting the steadfastness of the Palestinian people on their land in light of the rights guaranteed to them by international law and international humanitarian law, foremost of which is the protection and enjoyment of basic services, at the forefront of which is the right to life and the right to unfettered humanitarian aid. Therefore, Egypt has intensified its efforts to put an end to the war in Gaza and to put an end to the humanitarian catastrophe that civilians are subjected to by allowing the resumption of humanitarian aid to Gaza, where Egypt is one of the major contributors of this humanitarian aid, and we are working with our brethren in Qatar and friends in the United States to achieve this. Egypt has continued to support the efforts of UNRWA in Gaza and the occupied Palestinian territories and the rest of its areas of operation by maintaining the mandate granted to the agency by the United Nations General Assembly or its work throughout the occupied Palestinian territories. Egypt reaffirms its intention to cooperate with international partners and to organize a conference for the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip as soon as a ceasefire agreement is reached. This aims to implement the Arab-Islamic Plan for Early Recovery and Reconstruction. The implementation of this plan would contribute to ending the humanitarian crisis that the people of Gaza are experiencing quickly and effectively after more than 20 months of brutal aggression. Egypt provides security training programs to the Palestinian Authority's forces so that they would be able to enforce the law in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank in a manner in cooperation with Jordan. This training would contribute to the creation of an environment that would allow for the establishment of a contiguous Palestinian state. And here we welcome the announcement by French President Macron a courageous announcement of France's recognition of the State of Palestine in September, and we call upon all international parties to do the same. Let us together save the two-state solution by recognizing the Palestinian state and by not giving the veto to one party here. In closing, we'd like to express our sincere gratitude to the co-chairs of the conference and to the United Kingdom for the excellent coordination with Egypt in presiding over the working group on humanitarian action and reconstruction. And we thank all the countries and organizations that have contributed effectively to this effort through their valuable proposals. We wish this conference success, and we hope that together we will succeed in putting an end to this humanitarian disaster that has not been witnessed since World War II. The starvation and the systemic killing, the use of hunger as a weapon of war, of collective punishment, and a blatant violation of international law and international humanitarian law. I thank you.
أشكر معالي وزير خارجية جمهورية.
I thank Egypt for their remarks. I give the floor now to the Vice Minister for the Middle East and North Africa of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Your Highness. The United Kingdom was honoured to co-chair the working group on humanitarian action and reconstruction with our esteemed friends in Egypt. We're grateful to all those who contributed. Our discussions reflected a shared sense of outrage at the scale of human suffering. The humanitarian pause in fighting is essential, but long overdue. This must be kept in place and lead to a lasting ceasefire that brings the war to an end, allows hostages to be freed, and ensures aid can get into Gaza without obstruction. The working group heard a clear message that Israel must uphold international humanitarian law, protect civilians, and stop obstructing aid. It clearly rejected the misuse of aid for military or political ends and any attempts at demographic or territorial change. The United Nations must be allowed to save lives, to reduce suffering, and preserve dignity. There was strong support amongst the group for UNRWA, which faces a $200 million shortfall. The UK is acting to alleviate suffering. The Foreign Secretary has announced an additional $54 million in humanitarian assistance, including $27 million for UNRWA. We're working with international partners to fund joint aid projects, ensuring that assistance reaches those in the most desperate need. Contributors to the group also affirm their commitment to secure a better future for Israelis and Palestinians alike. We want to see meaningful steps towards a viable, independent Palestinian state alongside a safe and secure Israel. Beyond the immediate humanitarian crisis, Gaza's recovery needs will be vast. Getting the right approach will be crucial to ensure a two-state solution remains possible. And so the UK is mobilizing support for the Arab-Islamic Reconstruction Plan, building consensus on the security and governance needed for its implementation. Many in the working group echoed our view, and that of President Abbas, that Hamas must be removed from governance, disarmed, and renounce violence. We are committed to inclusive governance in Gaza, led by Palestinians, and we will expand technical assistance to the Palestinian Authority to support recovery and reconstruction. Meanwhile, we stand ready to coordinate international donor support and harness the power of the private sector. This includes co-chairing a conference with the PA and Egypt in October on innovative financing. Before concluding, I'd like to add that the UK reads the conference's outcome document in a way that is consistent with our own findings on compliance with international humanitarian law. As we look to the future, this is the moment for us to unite around an alternative plan for Gaza and take urgent and tangible steps towards a two-state solution. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency, the representative of the United Kingdom. أعطي الكلمة الآن
I give the floor now to the representative of the European Union, the European Commissioner for the Mediterranean and the co-chair of Work Group 8.
Excellencies, the European Union is honored to lead with the Arab League partners the work on Peace Day effort. By working together on this vision for the day after, we lay the ground for it to become a reality. In my capacity as co-chair representing the European Union, I will now report on the numerous contributions received and the working group conclusions with 3 important measures that gathered positive feedback. And I will try to be concrete. First, there is a clear need for a phased, conditional, and multidimensional actionable peace-supporting package. This package would be rolled out immediately after an agreement on a negotiated 2-state solution by the parties grounded in international law. Support to the Palestinian Authority is key. The European Union is already the largest assistance provider for the Palestinian Authority. I myself recently approved a 1.6 billion euro support package for 2025 to 2027 linked to structural reforms. We offered concrete ideas to elaborate our long-standing offer to provide an unprecedented package of political, security, and economic support for both parties. I'm currently working to set up a Palestinian donor group. This donors group should serve as a forum to support the Palestinian Authority's reform agenda, a place where donors can follow the reforms carried out and exchange views on how best to support the Palestinian Authority, as well as pledge their financial support. It will also serve as a concrete instrument to facilitate discussions on the recovery and reconstruction of Gaza. Second, we need to develop a regional security architecture for the Middle East. All necessary security guarantees will have to be provided to the parties. These will have to take into account sovereignty as well as the legitimate security concerns of Israel that cannot and must not be ignored. The full respect by all actors of international law is a must, including international humanitarian law and international human rights law. I also want to underline that many member states have mentioned the possibility of OSCE-inspired regional security model or other regional integration initiatives. And third, this conference must mandate a follow-up mechanism to implement its agenda. The Global Alliance for the Implementation of the 2-state solution stands out as an existing mechanism open to all and fit for purpose. It already includes more than 100 states and international organizations. The European Union and the League of the Arab States are encouraging all states to actively take part in this alliance. It appears best suited to take forward the important work initiated in the 8 working groups. Excellencies, once again, in my capacity as representative of the European Union, I must reiterate the Union's unwavering support and commitment both to peace and to the 2-state solution. We are already doing much to achieve these goals. In simple terms, we are keeping the Palestinian Authority from financial collapse, and we have stepped up our engagement to reach a ceasefire and improve access for humanitarian support. Regarding the humanitarian situation in Gaza, we have laid the framework to allow goods to enter Gaza to stop civilian suffering. But the framework was only partially implemented due to an ability to distribute the goods in a safe and organized environment. We expect Israel to deliver on agreement, which is not the case at the moment. We are fully committed to achieving lasting peace in the region and supportive in accordance with the international law of the 2-state solution. We want to see Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security within recognized borders. And to conclude, thank you very much, both Saudi Arabia and France for convening this important conference. looking forward to paving the way for the conference in September and to act as soon as possible in the most concrete way. Thank you so much.
I thank the representative of the European Union. I give the floor now to the Secretary General of the League of Arab States, Mr. Ahmed Abul Ghait.
Thank you. Thank you, Prince Faisal bin Farhan. Excellencies, our group has been focused on Peace Day effort, on what could be ensue, what other parties may offer for the Palestinians and the Israelis and for the region at large. Should a two-state solution be implemented and an independent, sovereign, and viable Palestinian state see the light of day? We received contributions from states, organizations, and civil society that attested to the fact that envisioning peace, just and comprehensive peace, is a possibility. A different regional reality is not a dream or an indulgence in delusional optimism. The major takeaway from the contributions we received is that a different future for the Middle East, one that is based on justice, respect, and tolerance, is possible and desirable. Another obvious conclusion is that such future will never materialize so long as the occupation and the apartheid system persist in Gaza and the West Bank. A new Middle East will never emerge from the suffering of the Palestinians, nor from the starvation, deportation, and the total suppression of the legitimate rights and aspirations of a people who are, like all other peoples, worthy of self-determination in the state of their own. Over the last months, the Palestinians have been subjected to the crime of our time, a genocide, something the world has not seen in this century. The flame that started in Gaza moved to set fire in the whole region in a matter of weeks. Regional war reared its ugly head, and the security situation deteriorated. A full-blown regional confrontation erupted with the dire consequences for the Middle East and the whole world at large. The lesson can be more obvious. There is no way to contain the Palestinian question in a box and pretend that regional peace and security could be maintained. Such an approach has been tried and failed, time and again. In the same vein, peace will never be achieved through perceived military supremacy. Military operations could bring lulls and temporary truces and best but no permanent peace. 23 years ago, the Arab Peace Initiative envisioned a different path: full Israeli withdrawal from the Arab-occupied territories since 1967. In return for the full normalization, that is a vision for permanent peace and coexistence, a vision for integration and security for all. It has been on the table for the 20 last years with no response whatsoever from Israel. The Peace Day effort builds on both peace support package by the European Union and the Arab Peace Initiative. It draws inspiration from their main ideas and basic promise. Only as a result of ending the occupation, advancing regional peace could be possible. Thank you very much.
أشكر معالي أمين عام.
I thank the Secretary General of the League of Arab States for his remarks. With that, we have heard from the co-chairs scheduled to speak under Roundtable 3. It is now my honor to invite our guest speaker of Roundtable 3, His Highness Prince Zayed Ra'ad Al Hussein, former United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, to deliver the keynote address on humanitarian imperative, rebuilding with dignity, accountability, and regional vision.
Thank you, Your Highness, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear friends. I am grateful to be joining Presidents Mary Robinson and Juan Manuel Santos as the third external speaker to this morning's session, and would like to begin by thanking our distinguished co-chairs, France and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, not only for their leadership on this topic, but also for their insistence. This conference centers on specific actions needed to realize a two-state solution. Our co-chairs are also right to think the greatest threat to the viability of a two-state solution is a staggering international community that lacks an understanding of either what a workable two-state solution actually entails or of the path we must all take to get there once the terrible atrocities in Gaza stop. In other words, how can we transition from rubble to renewal without a compelling and credible vision for what renewal means? Others may argue this differently, claiming the main obstacle to peace is not so much the violent extremists on both sides who demand the complete removal or destruction of the other. That perhaps is too obvious a point. Rather, it is the filing down in both societies of those who would believe peace is possible, such as the depth of fear, anger, and fatalism that now marks the prevailing mood. After all, virtually all Palestinians, Arabs, Muslims, and many others accuse the Israeli leadership of committing acts of genocide in Gaza. This on top of a long and cruel military occupation of Palestine. The Israeli government, the US administration, and some European leaders see Israel as fighting a violent enemy which threatens it existentially, an enemy that murdered Israeli civilians cold-bloodedly almost 2 years ago and took hostages. Many people around the world see truth in both views. Despite conceding the reality of the present moods and hatreds swirling within the two populations, what is fortunate about a vision of two states is that, like any other vision, it need not correspond exactly with the current psychology of Israelis and Palestinians. A vision is not for today's emotional audit, but for a tomorrow when new imperatives have inspired both populations, and not because the vision would be something utterly fanciful, quite the opposite. A two-state solution would have to be practical to gain support. This is why one of the first lessons to draw on from decades of failed efforts to resolve this conflict is that wholesale vagueness about the endgame is not strategic, it is dangerous. It empowers rejectionists and weakens those who believe peace is still attainable. Today, as we've heard many speakers say, leading figures in Israel's far-right government are openly articulating a vision of permanent occupation, territorial annexation, and forced displacement. And they are acting accordingly, taking steps every day to implement their vision through concrete policies and actions on the ground. The international community cannot counter this with carefully worded platitudes. What is needed is a clear collective affirmation of the two-state solution, not as an abstraction, but with specific policy commitments. a full end to the occupation, borders based on the 4th of June 1967 lines, and a sovereign contiguous Palestinian state. Short of this, recognition of Palestine will remain symbolic and will do little to transform the lives of Palestinians on the ground and affect meaningful progress towards Palestinian self-determination. Now, this is not a fantasy. Palestinians and Israelis working together have developed a vision for a two-state solution that can work, and they have devised elegant and symmetrical solutions to issues like settlements, refugees, and Jerusalem, core issues that have divided them in the past. The first point this vision articulates is this: a viable peace must address the emotional and deep connection felt by both Israelis and Palestinians to all the land, from the river to the sea. The vision also addresses the need for two distinct and sovereign states as a means of facilitating self-determinations for two peoples, and ensures a complete end of the military occupation. And it also overcomes past obstacles to the achievement of a two-state settlement, proposing a just solution for the Palestinian refugee population and a framework for Jerusalem while guaranteeing access to it. And it achieves all of this in a way that ensures Israel can maintain a Jewish voting majority. So how can this be done? There would be two states, but one homeland. The path to reach it entails as a starting point an acceptance of the armistice line as it was on the 4th of June 1967 as the border between the two states, with at most minor territorial adjustments rather than the more significant swaps or the sweeping annexation contemplated by other proposals. Israeli settlers who wish to remain in their homes would have the option of becoming permanent residents of the state of Palestine. They would pay their taxes, abide by local law, and enjoy full protection of their rights, as is the case with permanent residents in almost all countries. All Palestinian refugees will, in turn, have the right to become citizens of Palestine, and they would also have the option of becoming permanent residents of Israel, creating a path for return. Israeli Arabs would remain Israeli citizens and would be guaranteed full equality. Over time, there will be freedom of movement for all throughout and across both states. Jerusalem would be given special status, and there will be some confederal institutions, including a human rights court as an appellate body. A mechanism will need to be devised to bind the two states together, possibly through a cleverly designed, regionally anchored security arrangement to prevent unilateral abrogation. As a first urgent transitional step, a reconstruction and rehabilitation mission should be established with an international mandate and based on a regional partnership. To succeed, this mission must prioritize restoring political and economic links between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, which Israel and the PLO have recognized to constitute a single territorial unit. Finally, Israel's approach of achieving security through domination and fragmentation of Palestinian life by imposing a stranglehold on Palestinian territory, institutions, and leadership, and by the undermining of UNRWA over the years, has hitherto produced only a notion of security for Israel. It has deepened Palestinian dispossession, inflicted great harm and degraded the Palestinian civilian population, and threatened regional stability. Years of these measures and the expensive fortified fences and sensor arrays around Gaza did not prevent the atrocious attacks of the 7th of October. The lesson for Israel is not to double down on fortification, separation, and militarization. After all, there will always be new ways to inflict harm on Israeli citizens in the absence of a just peace. What has worked has been mutuality, a sense of equality in status and obligation and cooperation. This is why Israel's peace treaties with Egypt and Jordan have been so durable. They were not born out of dominance, but respect for sovereign equality and territorial inviolability. It is on these foundations that this vision of meaningful and durable renewal, this vision of two states, one homeland, was conceived, not in abstraction, but grounded in law, shaped by pragmatism, and sustained by a shared attachment to the land that both Israelis and Palestinians call home. I thank you for your attention.
I thank His Highness Prince Zaid bin Rad Al Hussein. And I will now hand over the meeting to my co-chair.
Et leurs précieux travaux.
We thank the working groups for their precious work that we can harness collectively and individually for peace and security for all in the region. This collective mobilization is just at its outset, and I hope that I can count on your determination to pursue your efforts for a more stable, safer, better integrated and more prosperous Middle East. Know that you can count on the full commitment of France here. This ministerial session, I hope, will allow us to amplify our efforts around these commitments at the level of heads of state and government on the margins of the 80th UN General Assembly in September this year. What better witnessing of faithfulness to the principle of the Charter of the UN, the right of the peoples to dispose to self-determination, to meet today in New York for law, justice, fraternity, and peace.
Nous allons maintenant passer.
We'll now proceed to the last part of our meeting, that is to hear the perspective of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, and I give the floor to their representative.
Distinguished chairs and delegates, I read this statement on behalf of the Commissioner General of UNRWA. As this conference takes place, life is being extinguished in Gaza. We are all appalled by the horrors reported daily, from the indiscriminate killing of civilians, including children, to man-made starvation inflicted on the entire population. Some days ago, I was able to meet virtually with my management team in Gaza. They described people there as neither dead nor alive, walking corpses. Our frontline workers are surviving on one small meal a day, if that, and fainting from hunger while at work. The exhaustion, anxiety, and isolation felt by my team in Gaza is overwhelming. Words of outrage and condemnation are no longer adequate for what is unfolding. There must be immediate action to impose a long overdue ceasefire, to reverse deepening starvation, and to release every hostage. Remarkably, my staff in Gaza have not entirely lost faith in the international community. They remain committed to the people they serve and cling to the hope that they will not be forgotten. My colleagues urged me to explain to you why the agency they proudly work for is vital to the survival and future of Palestinians and of Gaza. Once a ceasefire is in place, a massive scale-up of humanitarian assistance can be enabled by UNRWA's large workforce, our unparalleled distribution networks, and our deep reserves of community trust. These unique capacities are also indispensable for gradually bringing hundreds of thousands of traumatized children back to learning and providing psychosocial support, both crucial to avoid despair and future extremism. Distinguished chairs, the situation across the occupied Palestinian territory has deteriorated alarmingly. Compounding the decimation of Gaza, the annexation of the occupied West Bank is now a declared political objective, as is the dismantling of UNRWA. In the West Bank, we are already witnessing the human cost of efforts to end UNRWA's operations. School closures in occupied East Jerusalem have deprived 800 Palestinian children of access to education, with no alternative provided. Our schools and healthcare facilities provide vital public services that cannot yet be easily substituted by the Palestinian Authority. The collapse of UNRWA and its services will further weaken the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and compromise any future role it may play in Gaza. The agency's collapse will undermine efforts to achieve a political solution diametrically opposing the goals of this conference. Distinguished delegates, in response to the very real possibility of the agency imploding in the face of extraordinary adversity, Secretary General Guterres requested a strategic assessment of the impact and exercise of UNRWA's mandate under current constraints. The assessment has been finalized, and it proposes how the rights of Palestinian refugees may be protected. I must underscore that UNRWA was always intended to be a temporary agency. That it continues to exist and to be needed reflects long-term failures to reach a political solution. It is now for member states to deliberate on the options presented in the assessment and to take bold, decisive, and immediate action. Member states may determine, as done many times in the past, that UNRWA's operations must adapt to serve the goals of a political solution. We ask that member state action is guided by what will protect and serve Palestinian refugees best, in full alignment with the overarching goals of the General Assembly when it first established UNRWA through Resolution 302. Distinguished delegates, peace may begin with political agreements, but it can only be sustained through the realization of human rights and the protection of human dignity, through education, healthcare, and social development. UNRWA is a tremendous asset if what we seek is a just and lasting solution to the question of Palestine and its people. A genuine, time-bound political process would allow the agency to finally transition its government-like services to empowered and prepared public institutions, while maintaining custodianship of the refugee status, collective history, and identity of Palestinians until a political solution is complete. I again urge member states to act. The fate of millions of people is in your hands. Thank you.
Je remercie le représentant.
I thank the representative of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East.
I thank my co-chair for his moderation of this section, and I would like to deliver some closing remarks. In conclusion of this session, I would like to express my thanks and gratitude to all participating delegations for their active participation. Our deliberations today have reflected the joint political will to advance towards a two-state solution and achieving the aspirations of the Palestinian people. I would also like to mention that tomorrow a number of memoranda of understanding will be signed to build the capacities of Palestinian parties, including cooperation with the Palestinians to develop school curricula and cooperation in the area of digital capacity building and IT. We will also sign an important memorandum with the Social Solidarity Ministry to further implement training programs for capacity building. We emphasize that we must maintain this momentum and develop a clear follow-up mechanism. In conclusion, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia thanks you all, and we wish that this conference will be translated into concrete measures. And we remind delegations that we will resume the first plenary session of this conference at 3 p.m. today in the General Assembly Hall. Accordingly, I adjourn this session.